Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. Could we please have roll call?
Chair Clark.
Here.
Vice Chairman Gil.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Feck.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
You.
Commissioner Longstreet.
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Present.
All right, thank you. Do we have any suggested changes to the agenda?
Chair Clark, doesn't look like you can see my webcam. Weird.
No, we can't.
Just worked. Well, voice for now, Jill Zachary, Parks and Recreation Director. The only change is the order of the agenda, which is just an administrative detail. The annual advisory committee reports after the director's report. The East Side Neighborhood Park renovation project is actually, it should have been under old business. That was, missed that in the preparing of your agenda.
So after director's report, we'll be moving directly to the annual advisory committee reports?
Correct, and then move to the East Side Neighborhood Park renovation project.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any written communications we need to discuss? I don't. I saw you for a second, Jill.
Sorry, Chair Clark, Commissioners, no written communications.
Okay, great. And that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the commission. Total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes. Ms. Navarez, there you go.
Yeah. For those who wish to speak during public comment, please use the raise your hand functionality in the GoToWebinar control panel. We are currently displaying a graphic showing where that is located. When I call on you, please unmute yourself and then speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. For those who wish to speak on an agenda item later in the meeting, please raise your hand when the item is under discussion. I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a youth council report this evening?
Chair Clark, they are on a break.
Oh, okay. Lucky them. Commissioner committee assignment reports. I'll start with my far right, and that would be Commissioner Longstreet.
Yes, I attended the De La Guerra Plaza Revitalization Committee meeting on the 2nd of July, and we discussed the revisions to the plan after the joint meeting with the HLC. And moving forward, the project will be going back to HLC on August 18th. Oh, wait a minute, that's going to be postponed to a future date. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Staff will be reviewing the parking and traffic study, and they're talking about doing another survey, but there's not a lot of detail on that yet.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry.
Yes, I did attend the arts and crafts meeting and as well as walk the show recently. A good part of their meeting was consumed with interviewing new candidates. So they had their jury up and they are growing back to their normal size, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. Commissioner Baker.
The Golf Advisory Committee did not meet this month.
Thank you. Commissioner Feck.
Creeks Advisory did not meet this month either.
Summer fun. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
The Youth Commission also did not meet this month.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gill.
Well, the Park Foundation did meet this month, And we met last week, and aside from the normal financial reviews, we spent a fair amount of time discussing a rebranding effort that's being worked on, and both for just general branding and also a revision of the website, which is all looking pretty exciting. And then I also attended the Historic Land Commission meeting on the Ortega Park mural evaluation report and provided comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Gill. I was unable to attend the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, but I spent a couple hours, it was a really long one, watching the video, and we will be discussing the items that they discussed in that meeting later in the agenda. Of note, I did want to communicate that we had one project come before STAC that did not make it to the agenda. From what I understand, there's a new process when you're moving forward with planning for a project, that instead of going, submitting your entire application to the planning department and then coming to STAC, which leads to frustration on the members of the STAC committee and the applicants trying to remove trees, people trying to move forward with projects that involve tree removals are now coming to STAC before completing their application for the project or proposed development, which I think members of Street Tree Advisory Committee and this commission have been asking for quite some time. So I was really heartened to see that tree removals will be considered earlier in the process before people get too invested in their projects and spend money on reports for projects that won't come to fruition. So that was really great. I also attended the Park Foundation meeting with Vice Chairman Gill, and I'm excited with the new website and the branding, which will make Park Foundation's mission and goals a little bit easier to explain to the public when we're looking for people to invest in our projects and get involved. So that'll be exciting, and a big shout out to Ms. Zachary and Summer's case for moving forward with that. I think it's perfect timing. And then I attended 2 of the East Side Neighborhood Park Development workshops at the park. We're going to talk about that later. It was really exciting to see so much active participation in the community members before the final design of the project got completed. And then I actually went to a wedding where some neighbors of the East Side Community Park were at, and they were excited about the workshop. So they continue to talk about it after they were involved. So I thought that was really cool. That's all I have. And that leads to commission and staff communications.
Chair Clark and commissioners, in lieu of sending you an email, I've asked Tina Nelson to say hello to you. She is our new business manager, recently started with the city. I think this is week 4 or week 3. So maybe Tina, would you turn on your webcam and say hello?
Welcome, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. Hi, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm Tina Nelson, and this is week 3 in my new role as the Parks and Recreation Business Manager.
And Tina, give us a little of your background.
I have an extensive background in operations, management in large Fortune 500 business and also small business, and quite a bit of financial experience as well. I've worked in nonprofit sector, and this is my first experience working in government, and I'm very thrilled to be able to continue to serve my community in a capacity and work with the team here in Parks and Recreation and the city at large.
Welcome. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And does anybody have any questions or comments for Ms. Nelson before we move on? No? Okay. That leads us to employee recognition. Ms. Zachary, are we recognizing anybody special today?
Chair Clark, commissioners, yes, we have a recognition for 2 staff that were recognized at the July 20th council meeting for 5 years of service. They include Adam Porte, who's a recreation supervisor. He oversees the youth activities section in the recreation division. Adam came to us and actually started out as a recreation coordinator. was promoted to the supervisor position and has been instrumental, along with the other recreation youth activities staff, for many of the youth programs that we've offered this summer, working collaboratively with his other supervisors, including Jeff Smith and Tony Scholl. So want to recognize him for 5 years of service to Parks and Recreation. And then also Nathan Slack, 5 years of service with the city of Santa Barbara. He started as his street treat supervisor and promoted to the urban forest superintendent position. I'm going to say 2.5 years, although everything's becoming a bit of a blur. The COVID-19 pandemic has sort of blurred the last 18 months. But as you know, Nathan is our urban forest superintendent. You get to hear from him fairly soon in the agenda, and has grown tremendously and oversees our urban forest program.
I've congratulations to Adam and Nathan. I've had the opportunity to work a little bit with both of them. My experience with Adam Porte, a couple years ago, my son wanted to be a counselor for the kids' skate camp. And Adam was instrumental in getting my kid engaged and involved and signed up for the summer. And so I really applaud his commitment to youth engagement. That was a really good experience working with him. And then Nathan, I thought nobody would ever be able to fill Tim Downey's shoes. I was really sad to see the previous urban forest management, Tim Downey, leave, but Nathan has done it. He's doing a fantastic job. He's super engaged and intelligent. He knows his ordinance. He knows his trees. He relates well with the public. He is really good at managing the Street Tree Advisory Committee meetings, which is no easy task. It's a group of really committed, intelligent, passionate people. He wrangles everyone perfectly. And so just kudos to both of them. And I hope the 5 years grows into 50, not for their sake, maybe 20. So thank you, Adam and Nathan. And that brings us to the summary of council actions. Does anybody have any questions on those? Commissioner Longstreet?
Yes, for Ms. Zachary. Am I reading some good news in this? When we get down to July 20th and there seems to be some increases. Is that good news?
Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, I asked Rich Hanna to give me an update on where we are, because yes, as you can see, we've increased the contractual amounts for a number of our summer programs. And as a result of an overwhelming response for summer camps across the board in Santa Barbara. And I can tell you, and I'm going to scroll just so that I don't get it incorrect, but I believe we have 285 different summer camp, swim session offerings this summer, and have 5,100 youth participating, which is more than double last year and 5 times pre-pandemic levels. So it's an incredibly busy summer. Many kudos to our recreation staff and obviously our contractors who are providing great programs. And then also when we come back to you with sort of a roundup for the summer at a subsequent meeting, the number of scholarships that have been able to be issued is tremendous as well. Every single program that we offer provides a scholarship opportunity for every session. So it's not just those that can pay, it's also those that are maybe less able to pay that are enjoying a lot of summer fun. And we need to go back to council to appropriate more revenue in order to pay them because more revenue is coming in.
That is excellent news. It's always good news to see it from a budgetary standpoint, but it's even more important that the kids in our community are able to get out and participate in programs. So thank you to everyone who makes that happen.
Agreed. Are there any more questions or comments? Okay, so next on our agenda are the minutes. We've all had a chance to look at them. I can make a motion that we waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 23rd, 2021.
I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moved. And that brings us, we will welcome Mr. Slack, he of the 5-year fame, and our Street Tree Advisory Committee items.
We could go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a jacaranda from it's a street tree located within the public right-of-way on the side of the property at 2436 De La Vina Street. The applicant was requesting the removal of the jacaranda street tree due to property improvements that included the installation of a new driveway apron to provide for parking on the property. The committee reviewed the application, reviewed the site plans provided by the applicant that showed the location of the proposed driveway, noted the tree was in good health, but that the proposed improvements of the property were a practical development of the property. Had some additional discussion about driveway placement, and there really was no alternatives to install the driveway apron in direct line with the parking, the offsite parking proposed as part of the improvements. The committee ended up making a recommendation to approve the removal of the jacaranda on the condition that 2 new 15-gallon street trees would be planted in locations determined by the city arborist.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Slack at this time? No? Okay. Ms. Navarez, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this agenda item?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the GoToWebinar control panel. No raised hands, Chair Clark.
Okay. I can make a motion that the commission approves the removal, agrees with Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations to approve the removal on the condition that the applicant plant 2 15-gallon replacement street trees in locations determined by the city arborist. Again, that's the removal of jacaranda at 2436 De La Vina. And
I can second that.
okay. My only discussion would be that I know that for street trees, we don't have to have a finding, but I would say if we did it, there's good forest management and also reasonable development of property. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a fern pine located within the front setback of the property at 2901 Valencia Drive. The applicant was requesting removal due to the natural lean of the tree, the size. It's worth noting that we initially reviewed this application during the June meeting where the applicant was present, and during discussion there was some additional information provided regarding some property damage that was present from the tree. So the applicant and the committee mutually agreed to postpone the item for 1 month, allowing the applicant to provide some additional information that she had in regards to the damage that was present from the tree within the setback. So we revisited it this month. Lots of additional information was provided in regards to the damage to surrounding hardscape, as well as potential damage to the actual foundation of the home. The tree, as you can tell from the photograph and probably from site visit, is really close to overhead utility lines and has been subject to utility pruning for several decades now. And the tree is essentially like flat on one side or side pruned as well. The committee had some discussion about the merit of the retention of the tree given its size. There was general agreement that the canopy imbalance and the tree being subjected to routine utility pruning was problematic, and that the additional information in terms of property damage was exceedingly relevant and there was general agreement that it made practical sense to approve the removal of the tree. After review, the committee made the recommendation to approve the removal of the fern pine on the condition that a replacement tree be planted within the front setback that can achieve a minimum height of 20 feet at maturity. And during review, the committee determined the commission could make the finding that the regard for safety of persons or property dictates the removal. This is a pretty unique finding for us, and it's just worth noting that the committee did feel this finding was relevant from the basis of retention of the tree, allowing for further sort of long-term damage to the actual property.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have questions? Vice Chairman Gil?
Sorry. Just to clear, when I went by there, it looked to me like there was basically a large root, almost protrusion, for want of a better word, heading right at the foundation of the house or into the foundation of the house. Did I observe that correctly?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is accurate. There was both, you know, from site visit, you could tell that, and then there was the supplemental information provided, not just from the applicant, but from a contractor that does appear to illustrate that there is a pretty large root that's either pressing against or has made its way underneath the home.
Do we have any more questions? No?
Well, if not, oh no, this is everybody be speaking.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions, so please.
No, I realized I was jumping the gun because is there anybody with a
Oh,
raised?
that's right.
Yeah.
Ms. Navarro, is the property owner, anybody else here to speak on or against this tree?
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would just comment that I really appreciated all of the supplemental information from the applicant.
I agree that the applicant did her due diligence. She provided us with a whole lot of information on the damage to the house, which makes the decision a lot easier. So I likewise appreciated it, as did the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve the removal of the Afrocarpus falcatus, which I always thought was a podocarpus, but obviously I'm wrong, at 2901 Valencia Drive, on the condition that a replacement tree be planted in the yard that can achieve at least 20 feet or more at maturity. The findings that that regard for safety of persons or property dictates the removal.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is there's the request to remove a fern pine located in front of the property at 408 Corona Del Mar. It is also worth noting that Commissioner McGill was right. It used to be Podocarpus gracilior, but with the increase in DNA sequencing, they're changing tree names all the time. So you were correct, and now it's Afrocarpus falcatus. So the applicant was requesting the removal of this tree, again, strictly primarily due to property damage. The tree is located right at the corner of the property. There's the visible root flare is encroaching onto the property, and they provided some supplemental photos as well of the potential damage from the tree. They also listed just the general size and scale of the tree in relation to the small front setback in front of the property at 408 Corona Del Mar as reasons. The Street Tree Advisory Committee reviewed the application, had a brief discussion about the tree, did note that the tree was in good health. Fern pine is a tree that can get extremely large. It is shoehorned in this pretty tight location right at the corner of the property, and they, in a similar manner to the previous application on Valencia, felt that, or noted that the long-term potential for continued damage of the property was inevitable, and that the removal of the tree was practical. And after review, made a recommendation to approve the removal with the condition that the applicant replace a tree within the front setback that can achieve a height of 30 feet at maturity. They did make additional comments that it did need to be an appropriate species, and by that I mean that there's lots of trees that can function in narrow spaces that can provide some height and some screening while still functioning within this narrow front setback. They also did not exclude the use of palm trees. Palm could be very functional in this location, and they did provide comments that if the applicant did plant palms, that it would be favorable to see more than one palm, but that was not part of the actual condition. Again, the condition was just to replace the tree with a tree that can achieve 30 feet in height at maturity. And additionally, they, as again in the previous application, determined the commission could make the finding that regard for safety of persons or property dictates removal, again, with the emphasis on prolonged and increased damage to the structure.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I have a question. When I went out to look at the tree, I really did have concerns about where you would place a tree in that setback. It is, what, maybe 8 feet or something to get it enough away from the building. And the fact that there is a utility box pretty close to that where the tree is current tree is placed. What about the street tree there? How old is that tree? What's its potential for growth?
I think you need to unmute yourself, Mr. Slack.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, I think that those are relatively small trees, and they appear to be little gem magnolias, which don't grow much over time. They do have a, literature will say they grow to like 25 feet at maturity. It's a relatively new species of tree that we don't have a lot of like long-term historical evidence on, so it's tough to say if they can really reach that height over the long term. So it's safe to say over time they could easily reach 15 to 20 feet in height. And then in relation to just the small size, I think that was part of the reason why the committee did not exclude the possibility of replanting, a palm species within the setback. Palm roots are much more forgiving. They don't increase in diameter like a shade tree root system would, and they did make comments that they felt that that would be completely appropriate and would not be problematic in that location.
Okay, thank you.
Are there more questions? Okay. Ms. Navarez, is there anybody from the public to speak on this item?
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you. I can make a motion. Go ahead.
Well, I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for the removal of the fern pine at 408 Corona Del Mar, contingent with the replacement of a tree that reaches at least 30 feet at maturity, and that the findings would be for the safety of persons or property.
I can second that. Go ahead.
Okay. We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair
I'm gonna-
Clark, can I clarify? I did not catch who made the second. Was it you or Vice Chair McGill?
I made the second.
Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove 2 blue gum eucalyptus located within the front setback of the property at 1542 Hillcrest Road. The applicant listed safety concerns as well as fire concerns on the application. Those were the primary reasons listed for removal. The committee reviewed the application, had general discussion about the trees. The committee noted the trees were in relatively decent health, fair health, and that there was also discussion about the sort of lack of canopy that the trees actually provided despite their general height. These trees are subjected to routine utility pruning from the adjacent overhead utility lines. And in addition to the comments about just the lack of canopy that the trees actually provided, there was also discussion about the lack or the abundance, I should say, of native plants, as well as the native coast live oaks in the area, and how the eucalyptus trees really didn't fit into the landscape and generally just did not provide a lot of landscape value. The committee did make note that there really is not a fire issue with these living trees, so that really was not a driving criteria that they were looking at when evaluating these trees for removal. After discussion about the trees, the just general lack of canopy that they provided and how they didn't really fit into the native landscape within this part of town, they made a recommendation to approve the removal of both of the blue gum eucalyptus trees on the condition that 2 native tree species could be replanted in a location determined by the applicant. And they determined that the commission could make the finding that the principles of best forest management would be best served by the proposed removals.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Questions?
I have a question. On the application, the applicant only owns one of the trees, right? The other one is owned by a neighbor.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, that is correct. The applicant and the neighbor both were in full support of the removals. And we had that conversation up front, had a discussion with the applicant, and it seemed like it made a little bit more sense to kind of combine them since they bookend the driveway. But we did make sure that the adjacent property owner was in full support of the application before we brought it forward.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Ms. Namars, is there anyone here to speak to this agenda item?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay.
So,
Vice Chairman Gill?
yeah, this isn't really a question, so I was saving it till after comment periods, but I'm struggling a little bit with this one. And I guess I'm not gonna argue that these are the most beautiful trees I've ever seen. But it seems unusual to me for staff, honestly, to recommend approving what they say are healthy trees for kind of aesthetic purposes. I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of trees that we've looked at that aren't natives and are large specimens that we don't approve because they're healthy trees. And so I don't know, it's a comment that I'm struggling. This seems inconsistent to me. And I don't know if Mr. Slack, if you want to comment on that at all?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Gill, I think that's certainly a valid comment. I think the real driving decision-making factor for the rationale, especially for the finding, in terms of principles of good forest management, was the acknowledgement that this is sort of in a naturalized native oak part of town, and that the removal of the eucalyptus would make good practical sense just from a managing of this semi-native oak woodland area, and that the planting of additional native species would be of more gained benefit than the retention of the blue gums. That was essentially the conversation that occurred within the committee.
Sure, and I guess my only comment is we reject a lot of applications to remove eucalyptus for not that dissimilar reasons.
Are there any more comments? I do, Vice Chairman Gill, what you're saying is a totally valid point, and that's why I'm hoping at some time in the future we can have more objective standards. I know we go by the municipal code, but I think sometimes that leaves us open to a lot of interpretation. I know the Street Tree Advisory Committee members from going to the meetings for a couple of years, and they're fiercely devoted to our urban forest. So I almost never, it's not that I disagree with their decisions sometimes, but I almost never question their insight and knowledge when it comes to street tree removals. I never feel like they're doing something that doesn't make sense, just because I know how invested they are in our forest. But I do recognize what you're saying, and it's a valid point. And maybe in the future we can have a little bit more of an objective, what's it called, rubric or decision-making tree. But for now, this is, I guess, what we have. And I guess what Mr. Slack was saying is that it's because of the more native type of landscape in the area that they don't feel like these trees would be a material loss to the neighborhood. If anything, there would be something gained by planting more native species. Unless, of course, they happen to be oaks that get defoliated by the oak moth that's killing things this season. But that's another topic. All right, we'll stop babbling.
Well, I would make a motion. Are we ready? Have we done public comment? I can't. Okay.
We did.
I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for the removal of the 2 blue gum eucalyptus at 1542 Hillcrest Road, contingent on the replacement with 2 native species that can reach at least 20 feet tall. And the findings are for good urban management, or help me, Mr. Slack.
They're for the principles of good forest management would be best.
Yes. Okay, that's my findings. All right.
I will second that motion.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Me? You had a really good point, Vice Chairman Gil. Okay. We're moving on to punto. Yep, there we are.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, real quick before we review this item, I will make mention that we always review commission action items during the early on in the stack meeting, so we'll make sure to convey the discussion that the commission had in relation to the blue gum eucalyptus trees, and make sure that that part of the discussion is brought to the attention of the committee. The last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a silk floss tree located within the front setback at 1212 Punta Gorda Street. The applicant listed multiple reasons for removal on the application: partial blockage of solar panels, debris concerns. There was also safety concerns noted. There were some small, sort of curious little spots along the stem that the applicant was concerned about. Those were determined to be primarily cosmetic and not of structural concern. The committee discussed the tree, reviewed the application, noted the tree was in generally good health, and that debris was not, is typically ever a concern for tree removal or a valid criteria for tree removal. There's discussion about the solar. The solar impact is very minimal, and the committee did make notes that there's workarounds to that were presented as part of the supplemental materials from the applicant. And the safety concerns, as previously noted, were determined to be non-structural, so mostly just a cosmetic or curious type of discoloration of the bark tissue. After review, the committee made the recommendation to deny the request for removal of the silk floss tree at 1212 Punta Gorda Street.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have any questions? I have one question I would like to start with. During the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, one of the members had asked you if there was any kind of municipal ordinance regarding shading the solar panels by trees to provide guidance in these situations. And you said you thought that was referenced in the view dispute resolution process. Did you go back and see if there was any other anything in the municipal code about solar panels and shading by trees, or I'm asking, what can we reference in the future if this becomes an issue? More and more people are going solar. Is there anything in the municipal ordinance to guide us?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I'm unaware that there's any language that would say give preferential treatment to solar panels over to a setback tree. So I think the commission with a setback tree removal request always has purview to make those decisions in relation to partial or full solar blockage of a tree located within the front setback.
Chair Clark and commissioners, the city does have guidelines regarding solar access in the application to install solar panels. And it takes into consideration what the applicant has to provide related to the location, the building height, the zoning. We have in the past had issues where tree removal or proposed tree relocation have come up as a result of the need or the desire to install solar panels. So it is something that both the commission and the Street Tree Advisory Committee, rather than going in a length discussion with you this evening, we could bring back to you so you better understand the different considerations. And then also, I think, and then keeping in mind, obviously, the relationship of the urban forest and city-owned trees versus privately owned trees, and then the privately owned trees that may be on another parcel that affect the ability of the adjacent parcel to install solar panels. So there's a variety of different considerations that would be good to inform you of, and the process by which applicants can seek out permission to install solar panels. And we only anticipate that will increase with the city's desire to be far more sustainable as far as energy use over time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to revisit at a future date. Not necessary for this particular case because it's just partial shading and there's mechanical workarounds, but I would love to see that in the future. Thank you. Are there, Vice Chairman Gil?
Yeah, the applicant submitted some subsequent information, the written communication where he showed illustrations of photos that show what these trees can become. And I was particularly interested in those because of the proximity of this tree to the house. And I'm also bearing in mind, again, it's my consistency thing, the findings we've just made for the trees formerly known as podocarpus. I have to go reintroduce myself to the ones in my backyard. But I'm concerned about consistency and really also just from the applicant's point of view, what this tree is likely to become and how long it's going to take it to become that way.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Gill, the silk floss tree is a tree of great potential. The trees that we have in town, they're several decades old, and it would take, again, several decades for this tree to mature and get of any size that was comparable to the largest ones in town, some of the ones referenced on the Lower East Side. The uniqueness of the species, or one of the unique characteristics of this species, is the trunk size. It develops this really large, sort of swollen trunk, and that is seen. There's some variance amongst the species. Some develop a really pronounced, really large trunk, and then some others don't really develop as large of a trunk. The short answer to this is it is a tree that can grow to, it can grow to 40, 50, even 60 feet tall, and probably 30 feet to 40 foot in spread in a perfect scenario. That's sort of a perfect world scenario. But it can get to extremely large sizes. It's no doubt shoehorned in relatively close to the property, but super close to the fence, and then the adjacent driveway to the adjacent property owner's entrance there too. So it's surrounded by lots of stuff, and it would be very practical to say that there's potential for some, if not considerable, damage over the course of the tree's life.
Thank you.
So given that, I guess I'd be curious to know a little bit more about the rationale for the denial, because it doesn't seem to be fitting with the rationale for approvals that we've just done.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think the discussion kind of revolved around the age of the tree and the value that the existing tree contributed to the property. Some of the members of the commission may recall that we did review this property a little over a year ago. There were some additional removals that occurred. There was a quite large European horse chestnut located to the west of the actual structure. And there was a weeping fig that was planted directly in front of the silk floss tree, which is part of the reason why the canopy is so high. The applicant did receive approval at that time to remove both the horse chestnut and the weeping fig, and as a condition of that approval, planted a new coast live oak street tree, which is in front of the property there. And I think the committee discussion revolved around the value of the tree providing to the property in the adjacent neighborhood, and again noting its relatively small size currently. I don't think that the committee was opposed to reviewing it in the long term. Sometimes the discussion revolves around retention for some period of time, allowing the street tree to develop, and then at a future date revisiting the removal of the silk floss tree.
I would add at that point, when we made the determination for those other removals, there was a great concern about denuding that whole area. And so I would be uncomfortable removing it at this time until something else grows up, because there basically is a lack of canopy of any kind in that area.
And the tree that was planted, the street tree to make up for the horse chestnut and the fig, is not looking great right now. It's been attacked by the oak moths. So I also would be uncomfortable removing 3 trees from one property in such a short amount of time without letting the street tree that was compensation get established first. Are there more questions before we see if the applicant is here? Ms. Navarez, is the applicant here to speak?
Yes, Chair Clark, we have a raised hand from Mr. Ricardo Frostockel. Mr. Frostockel, I will unmute you. You will have 2 minutes to speak. If you need to unmute yourself.
Welcome.
There you go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Street Commission and any committee members. Yeah, so, you know, looking back at my notes on this here, let's see, let's just go over what's currently going on with the tree. The tree is currently about 12 inches round and butted up against the fence like Nathan had spoken of. These trees do grow to be numerous feet around, and it literally is against the fence, and the fence is against the driveway to the adjacent park. The house that I live in and the park next door are both low-income housing complexes. I don't have the money, and neither does the park next door, to afford to remove a tree later on and fix a driveway when it's going to. It's going to lift the driveway. It's going to lift my fence. It's 3 feet from the corner of my house, 2 feet from the roof. So, you know, it's just a matter of time before this tree is going to have to come out, and then we're going to have to fix the fence. We're going to have to fix the driveway. I might have to re-level my house. I'm hoping that's not going to be the issue. The tree is blocking one of my solar panels in the evening, and unfortunately, the mechanical ways of fixing it are beyond the cost of what I am capable of affording. If I could have done it, the more high-end solar system, I would have done it in the first place. I don't even have a battery backup. It's just solar during the day because I can't afford a battery backup. I put that solar panel system in myself for $4,000, which was pretty cool from my point of view. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Kind of running out of time here, but there's a few other things I wanted to discuss, and one is that front tree. You mentioned that front tree. It's fully recovered, by the way. I've been taking care of that, and it's now got all new leaves on it. So other than that, you know, I really don't see there is no way for me to change. Oh yeah, on the solar panels, I put them as far back from the front tree and the front of the house as I could, because I knew this was going to end up happening, and it's only going to get worse as the tree starts to get wider and taller. And that means I'm going to lose out on the amount of electricity I can produce and how much my carbon footprint I can remove. One other note is that I've offered to replant or plant a couple trees anywhere the city wants. And I'm an environmental activist and a human rights activist. And there was some comments made during the commission that were against my character, and I didn't appreciate it. And I want you guys to know that out. So I know Nathan asked me to cut it out of the report, the initial report, because I had wrote that in there, but I'm going to verbally state it here and now. So you guys know that's just who I am. I am a tree hugger. So I don't, I don't want to have to take the tree out, but it's just.
Sorry, Mr. Frostockel, your time was up.
And I did give you extra time because we did want to hear from you. So thank you for elaborating. Mr. Slack, you had mentioned that this species differs in its development tree by tree. They don't all end up giant sidewalk house lifting specimens. Is there any way to extrapolate from the current state of the tree 10 years from now to determine whether or not it is a matter of time before it would have to get taken out before lifting the house? Or
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think that when you look at the species, it's in a very small space. So it's in a realistically in a short period of time is going to fill in that space. Even though I did reference that there can be tremendous variance in the species, you know, it's still a pretty good sized tree. So even when they don't say perform that well, they still can grow to pretty considerable size. So the likelihood of, you know, structural impact to the raised mobile home, that's kind of debatable depending on where the footings and that sort of thing is. That's really tough to weigh in on. But the fence and the driveway, you know, in all reality, it's only, you know, a matter of time till there's some level of disruption. The question is can that be managed? You know, is that a reasonable burden for the property owner to have to deal with, or the, you know, the mobile home park? But this species of tree is a street tree, has caused considerable hardscape damage to both curb and gutter and street, as well as sidewalk. When it's been planted in a relatively narrow parkway, we're talking, you know, 6 feet or smaller. It does have a propensity to have, you know, surface rooting, you know, roots close to the surface, and that leads to the potential for hardscape disruption. So it is, as a street tree species, it certainly has pushed some hardscape around, and we've had to do some creative engineering to, you know, try to retain some of these trees over the years through, you know, bulbing the curb out or sort of ramping the sidewalk up over it. So I think that, you know, it's not, in all reality, there's going to be some level of disruption to the adjacent property, the fence and or the driveway, as a result of tree development.
Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
That does bring up a question I have. In most mobile home parks, you're simply renting the land. Who owns this tree? Does the space owner own this tree, or does the owner of the mobile home park own this tree?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, I believe it's the mobile home park, and Mr. Fristockel's making the application, moving the application forward with the, on behalf of the mobile home park. Sorry, I misspoke there. And he can probably provide some clarification to that. But yeah, the mobile home park itself is one large parcel.
Because what I'm getting at with this is, as you look at the mobile home park, there's not very much canopy as I looked down that driveway. As we're looking at planting it, you know, I mean, our goal is canopy, right?
No, I'm off camera.
Our overall goal. And so, you know, canopy within the mobile home park, or, you know, do you see where I'm taking this? You know, planting it, do we need more street trees? I mean, I know Mr. Frostockel offered to plant trees.
But she's awful scrawny.
Mr. Perry, I think you need to mute. What takes place from this that replaces this tree for the community?
Excuse me, Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet. There's a surprisingly large number of street trees on Punta Gorda Street. So I don't know, nothing immediately in the vicinity in terms of like open parkway. There's actually quite a bit of trees that are on Punta Gorda Street, at least within the immediate vicinity, as well as several new oak trees that were planted as part of that development just to the west of this specific property. So there's actually quite a bit of canopy cover on the street if you look at the street, and there's also potential as these younger trees start to mature. There's almost assuredly a planting location in the general vicinity that could be identified for street tree planting. There's vacancies, you know, within a block, almost assuredly, where a new street tree could technically be planted. But in terms of the mobile home park, you're right. Most of it it's hardscape, and there's really no internal tree canopy. There's a couple little spotty areas when you look at the aerial, but predominantly there's really no true canopy cover within the mobile home park itself.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Longstreet, are you suggesting that perhaps you would want to support removal if a sufficient replacement that would give back to the community?
I think I'm leaning that way. From Ms. McGill has brought up some excellent points about consistency. We're looking at a tree that, quite honestly, aesthetically isn't, once the removal of the other trees around it, this was something I think we all were afraid would happen to it, that it would have this kind of telephone pole look, and then, you know, it just doesn't have a natural growth pattern to me. I don't know. So I would be willing to entertain the idea of some plantings in the vicinity that would benefit the community, because overall we do want a canopy in that neighborhood. And the front of the mobile home park seems quite barren to me. Dark and quite barren.
I mean, so from my perspective, that would be very consistent with the kinds of findings we've made with these sort of problematic trees where, I mean, as recently, I believe as last month, where if you put in, if the applicant puts in, you know, good canopy trees, it's over time provides a net benefit to the community.
And Mr. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but the applicant did indicate to plant multiple replacement street trees. I think on the application it said, I thought I saw trees with a plural. Yeah.
I thought I saw two, but I could be remembering that wrong.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, he did imply plural. So I think, and feel free to, you know, seek clarification from the applicant as well, but I think he would be willing to plant more than one tree if the commission felt that that was a necessary condition.
The actual language is, I would be more than happy to buy and or plant some trees anywhere you would like. So yes, it's definitely plural.
I think two would, we've lost, if this tree gets removed, it would be 3 trees in a pretty short period of time with a one replacement, I believe, so far. So if we asked for a replacement with 2 trees, that would end us with the same amount of trees that the property originally had, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any more discussion?
I'm happy to make a motion if we're at that point.
I think we're at that point.
Okay, well, I will move that we approve the removal of the silk floss tree at 1212 Punta Gorda Street, number 23, on the condition that the applicant plant 2 street trees of a species and location of the arborist choosings, and that the second here, regard for safety of persons or property dictates the removal, and the principles of good forest management will be best served.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Can you please confirm that you are no longer doing?
Commissioner Perry, I think you need to mute.
All right. That brings us to our director's report. Welcome again, Ms. Zachary.
Chair Clark and commissioners, just a few things. Some of these you will be talking more about in the next couple of items, but did want to make sure we captured them. And as Chair Clark mentioned, we've had a number of open houses at Eastside Neighborhood Park to help guide us in the design of the renovation of that park. And I believe there'll be a couple more next week with the community gardeners to talk through potential changes in the park and get their input on the community gardens as well. Community gardens themselves, the shape, the location won't change much, so it's not like a major redo. Dwight Murphy Field, again, you'll have a presentation shortly on asking the commission to make findings on this project. We had an open house last Thursday. We'll give you a little bit of update on that. We have another one tomorrow. So it's actually, we're taking advantage of being able to be outside and congregating safely while we can. And finally, we've been waiting for this day. So that's why you keep seeing open house, open house, open house. We've been waiting for a long time to do these things. And then lastly, the Bonnet Park renovation project. I'm sorry to say that it's been going on for far longer than we ever anticipated. However, I'm pleased to share that we think that perhaps we'll be able to reopen the park to the public in August. The project has had a number of considerations that have delayed its progress, but ultimately we hope we'll be able to turn over a nice little update to that park to the community and have a low-key welcome back to the park event. Nothing like what we used to do, no cookies and coffee and that kind of thing, but hope to have an opportunity to welcome you out there. And that's it. We gave you a bit of an intro on what we'll be reporting back related to the summer, which will happen at a subsequent meeting, but it's just been super busy. Running around doing any number of things, whether it's recreation or park maintenance or our capital projects.
Thank you. And I think from here, we're going to go to the annual advisory committee reports. And remind me, historically, I think we just acknowledged that we've received it and we've read it and we have the opportunity to ask questions.
That's correct, Chair Clark. Essentially, we report to the commission every year the activities of the advisory committees. We spend a little time acknowledging and thanking indirectly the committees that continued to meet, just like the commission, despite COVID, everything being in a virtual webinar format. But the work of these committees continued through the year and really supported our efforts as a department.
I do have just a couple questions. I was just noticing that we do have multiple vacancies, and I was wondering, is that because of COVID and us not being the department not being able to actively recruit? Like the IPM committee is short 2 people.
Chair Clark, yeah, the IPM advisory committee is a really challenging committee to find participants. We've been short 2 members for some time. We have 3 members that have been with us through thick and thin and really are great advisors to that program. And I think it's a testament to their desire to continue to work with us and what we've learned together. And at the same time, trying to find 2 more people to have the flexibility to meet in generally during the day, during the work week is the challenge that we have with that committee.
That makes a lot of sense. And my other question was, I should know this and I don't know this. So the IPM committee is 4 community at-large members and 1 representative from the Pesticide Awareness and Alternatives Coalition. Is it Greg, Kristen, or Larry that's from the PAC? Do you know?
It's Larry, Chair Clark from the PAC.
Okay.
Representative, that's correct.
Okay. I didn't know. I should have known that. Okay. Thank you. Did anyone have questions about our advisory committees? Besides that? No? Okay. Thank you. And then let's all extend a gratitude for these people who show up regardless of COVID, regardless of the season, regardless of their busy work lives, and help continue to make this city the amazing place that it is. I'm grateful for them. Actually, I want to be them, some of them, the street tree advisory committees. I wish I knew what they knew. They're so smart. So thank you to all those members. And if anyone knows someone who'd be good on the integrated pest management committee, pass their name along to Ms. Zachary. And with that, we're going to jump back up to the East Side Neighborhood Park Renovation Project, which is for discussion.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Denise Johns, Associate Planner with the City's Parks Department. We have for you this afternoon an update on the East Side Neighborhood Park Renovation Project.
Ms. Johns, are you able to turn your volume up a little? I'm
Sure.
having a little bit of trouble hearing.
Oh. Testing?
That's
Better?
much better. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. As you recall, in January of this year, the Commission received a presentation from staff about the project. We reviewed the background, the concept plan, the early objectives, our estimated timelines, next steps, and the probable costs. The project renovation goals are to improve park safety and to address misuse by providing, improving and increasing recreational opportunities and create spaces for neighborhood and family gatherings, to provide safe and accessible park features and develop an attractive family-oriented setting. At that time, our features that addressed those objectives were to relocate the playground to a more prominent, more visible location along Soledad, to provide an attractive, accessible walkway connecting all of the park features, redesigning the picnic area, and expanding what we can of the open space area, and then making some suggestions about how to reuse the existing playground area. Next slide. In order to move forward with our design, the Park Department needed to learn from the neighbors and from park users. So we were limited, obviously, last year and early this year in the means that we could use to gain information. So starting last year, I think we mentioned that we had a little pop-up event at the Franklin Center during their food distribution event. And thereafter, we posted online a SurveyMonkey survey in English and Spanish and sent around postcards requesting people to take the survey. Once the health department allowed, we were able to start planning events on site, which took place in May. As you mentioned, we had 2 open houses in May, and we used a variety of means again to advertise that event and also to distribute information about the renovation project. So we used social media, we had direct mailing, direct emails, and we also advertised on a Spanish-speaking radio station, Bronco Radio. As from this information, we were able to develop 3 different broad-minded concept plans to present to the community in May. Next slide. It was an interactive event. We were hoping to talk directly to people who were attending. We encouraged people to respond to the exhibits using Post-its and stickers to indicate and talk about elements that they liked, or write on the exhibit things they would do differently and make suggestions. We also provided pen and paper, and people actually wrote us comments that we used as part of our process in analyzing the data. Next slide. As a result of our SurveyMonkey and our open house events, we learned that the neighbors and the park users would like the park to be an attractive, open, welcoming, safe space for family and casual events. We also learned needs to have a lot of open space. So these are the exhibits that we showed. These are the big picture ideas that we asked people to respond to. We wanted to know about what they thought, how much open space was required, how picnicking amenities should be placed on the site, how many, should we have barbecues? So people were responded to that using either speaking to us directly or placing their information on the plan. We also prompted ideas that just to learn the community's thoughts about fitness equipment and maybe games. And we learned that those were favorably received. And so some of these ideas are interpreted in our next open house. What we did learn as well is that the neighbors and park users wanted to see a concept plan that showed the playground located where it currently is. Next slide. So in July, we invited people again to visit us. At the site, we had another open house specifically to talk about the placement of the playground. But we did show other elements in the two designs that are consistent, that are responding to the comments that we received. In addition to discussions about the playground, we included fitness equipment, we enlarged turf as much as we can, and we used a modest amount of picnic tables in response to the neighbors requesting fewer picnic tables. So it is actually these two options that we are hoping to hear the Commission's comments relative to the playground placement. So in this diagram, we have the playground located on Soledad. Again, it's a visible, prominent location. And this is the idea is to reclaim the park as a family-oriented, healthy environment in a visible location, and signaling that. We left the corner open. We found that at the corner of Soledad and Yananali, it's often used for civic events, including the ones we held. We placed picnic tables underneath the oak trees, not that many, because we requested that they be adjacent to the playground. We also heard from a survey, in our survey, and people who responded that to please locate the playground where it is because it's closer to the restroom. In place of the existing playground, we're suggesting and exploring the idea of placing a rentable picnic space in area 4, and it would be adjacent to a large amount of open space. All of it is connected with an accessible route. Next slide. This exhibit is another option where we are exploring the idea of the playground staying in its existing location. We're taking advantage of the existing mature trees and shade, and in response to the neighbors and the park users and parents who requested that the playground stay where it is because it's farther away from Soledad and potential misuse. And also it is, both playgrounds are encircled at the request of parents, again, with a low fence. And we're in this exhibit, we're showing a picnic table and connecting walkways. In this drawing, we're putting the fitness equipment. By the way, fitness equipment that we're using for inspiration is similar to or same as the equipment that we have installed at the Cabrillo Ball Field for reference. Next slide. The responses that we've heard so far, we did present, by the way, the two options at the Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting, July 12th. During, however, our open house meeting in July 10th, the attendees preferred to see the playground stay where it is. Then parents requesting that it is a little bit more secluded, a little safer feeling. And then at the Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting, we did receive quite a few comments about the plan and comments about offsite improvements, but those who had a comment about the playground did recommend that the playground be located in a more prominent location. Again, to place the playground in a more prominent, more visible location and reclaim it for families as a healthy, family-oriented space. Next slide. As you know, we have received a grant, a community development block grant, and the portion of the funds for this project is also scheduled in the 2022 budget. Next slide. Our next steps are to incorporate what we hear from you all tonight and other information that we hear from. We are having, in fact, a meeting with the community gardeners in next week, and incorporate that into hopefully the next two, the close to final concept plan, and thereafter we'll be going through our review process, and also begin developing the construction plans with the construction to begin in spring of 2022. Next slide. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you not only for that presentation, but I just wanted to thank you for the outreach you've done. I've been so impressed over the last couple months with what I've seen at that park and how you've involved the community. Just super grateful for that, because I know that 6 months down the line, people aren't going to be like, well, I didn't hear about that. I want to say something, you know. So thank you for your proactive outreach.
Thank you, Chair Clark. We are very excited to be back and be able to interact with the community members face to face. It's really important to us. Thank you.
So it seems like the main question that we have here is kind of centering around the playground relocation. And I know you have the specific statistics in our packet, the percentage of people who had attended the workshop who wanted it moved and who didn't. I was wondering if you could tell us those numbers. And then my other question was, what percentage of the NAC attendees that said they wanted the playground moved actually live really close to this park? I guess I want to know that.
Sure.
Any news on?
Please.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Navarez, could we go back to a couple of slides that show them side by side? Thank you. I think we did, just to respond to your question, Chair Clark, about, and thank you for that. We had kind of a light turnout on July 10th, but probably we had about 10 or 12 people ask to keep the playground where it is, and then maybe another 5 or 6 recommend relocating it. And I actually think that people that live closest to the park, and it's the parents that who are, I think it was a little bit mixed. Some people thought it would really help the park to have the playground relocated. We didn't ask them if they have children particularly, but the parents, people who did attend, who are parents, did prefer it in a little bit more tucked away. I think we could have made, honestly, a better, this is on me, maybe a better representation of the benefits of the playground being relocated, because it will have a benefit to the experience of the park. And I think the parents felt a little bit more comfortable keeping it tucked away.
Ms. Ecker?
Clerk and Commissioners, if I could just add, I think, the challenge that we have is the playground's been located where it is today for some time. We do have use of the park by certain individuals that discourages a more family-friendly use of the park, which is really some of what's driving this project. The rest of it being this park needs renewal. It's long overdue. It's tired. It needs city reinvestment. And maybe residents are having a hard time envisioning how that actually would play out. And so we're, sort of struggling with what the best approach is and balancing a variety of considerations. The image on, let's see, I guess it would be on all of our lefts of this slide, show an enlarged playground. And I don't know if that was as clear in the presentation, but what we've tried to do with this design is actually double the size of the playground. So it becomes a more prominent feature versus tucked in the corner, yet still maintaining the turf, which is play space. And then what we've been trying to do, and again, this goes back to that balance of maintaining open spaces for family gatherings, providing some seating, but seating also does attract uses that often could be challenging. And how do you balance all of those objectives? And then again, in the slide on the left, near the restroom, showing a fitness area. So activating the Soledad section of the park to again try to change things up a bit instead of the playground. So we're sort of in this space where really your input would be helpful, because we do need to move forward with further design to be able to stay on track for the project grant funding.
Thank you. Oh, shit. I was lost you. Hold on. Okay, so obviously you can hear me. Excuse me. I can't see you, but what I wanted to say was something I understand that we're trying to reclaim this park because there are people that basically live there. They live in their cars on the street in front of the park. And if we move the playground to that area, we'd be increasing active participation in recreation, displacing undesirable elements and behavior. But what I've heard from residents, not only at the workshop, but just out living my life, running into people who talk about it, they're concerned that if we move the park, then there's going to be, I understand that you're going to put equipment and really spruce up the place where the park was to get people actively recreating there, but there's some concern that it'll become a vacuum without the playground there, and then the caravan will move around and occupy a different part of the neighborhood. So there's some very concerned residents around the corner where the vacuum would be. Vacuum that we're trying to prevent, but we can't really say whether or not we will. And I wish I could see you.
Yeah, I mean, Chair Clark, since you can't see us both.
There you are.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Feck had her hand up at one point, and so did I.
Okay.
Maybe we'll let Commissioner Feck go first.
Commissioner Feck?
Few questions. So is there a cost difference, like a major cost difference between the two layouts? The first question. The second question is in regards to the demonstration space and cooking class. Is that a kitchen or some sort of like community center situation for people to rent out? And then kind of just a third observation is I noticed there's like a barbecue pit next to the fitness center on that, the attachment 2. I was just thinking like maybe that location, if you went with attachment 2 may want to be relocated, because if you're working out, you probably don't want to be smelling like smoke. Just an observation, but yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Feck, for those questions. There's not a substantial cost difference between the two. No, possibly a little bit of a savings with leaving the playground in its existing location because we are attempting to use some of the existing footprint. So possibly a little bit of savings in the excavation. The event space, we'll be talking to the community gardeners about that a little bit more next week, but we're envisioning really just a simple picnic area and a place for if the gardeners would like to hold an event, just to gather, a gathering space. And the barbecue next to the fitness, maybe not, if you're working out.
Thank you.
We thought food and exercise. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought.
So part of it is really these are still conceptual, and so what Ms. Johns has done is thrown ideas out there, and yes, some of it might not seem intuitive, but really it's the layout and trying to respond to what people were interested in, and where we need to get to is really refining it down to what's reasonable and feasible, and then reaching out obviously to the neighbors in terms of how the activity will relate to them once the park is built.
So just a questions again on who wants what where. I mean, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that by and large, parents of children like the idea of the playground being where it is, you know, whether or not they've been, for whatever reason, they like the playground being where it is because perhaps what I'm hearing is they have a nervousness about the prominence of the playground, which is actually what you're trying to sell, is it making the playground front and center of the park. That actually causes some nervousness amongst the parents, if I'm hearing you right. Whereas I'm building a little bit on what you're feeding back, Chair Clark, that perhaps the nervousness about, or the desire to move it to another location is not driven so much by parents with children. And where I'm going with this is if there really is a strong desire by the families themselves to keep the playground where it is, that I think is important to listen to.
And I thought the reason stated for that was shade and restroom accessibility. I didn't hear the nervousness, but maybe it was.
So, Vice Chair Miguel, I don't think that we would characterize the response from the neighbors or from the parents of a strong response to keep the playground where it is, because honestly, quite a few parents said they really appreciated the idea that the playground next to the restroom would be great. Okay. So we have heard both that they liked it. We are in both places. And I think the hesitancy is, as Ms. Zachary was pointing out, that the playground has been located where it is for many years, and visualizing how relocating it in a new location would be useful or helpful is a leap. So,
okay.
When you were developing the different playground plans, did you look at the literature out there, look at other community examples where moving a playground would kind of help the situation at the park?
The research is since you asked, the National Recreation Parks Association has tremendous amounts of research about how to activate a space. And it is something proven that when you do provide a high profile, easily accessible, visible, not just play equipment, but entrances, clear walkways, there's not just one element. It does change the character of the park for the positive and reduce misuse. It is something that has been studied and proven. So it's yes, relocating and livening up a space, as we've seen, as you've seen in the park spaces that the city's worked on, the departments worked on as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
This plans look beautiful as far as the renovation of the park, which is long overdue, and I'm so happy to see it. It does concern me a little bit to have all the concentration of draws, restroom, fitness, and playground all so close together. And does that leave us a hole in the back that we've just sort of moved our problem? Is there a way we maybe want to separate the fitness equipment out so that we have people actively recreating at both ends of the park? And who are we drawing? I don't really have a clue. I drove by Dwight Murphy today around noontime, and there were 10 guys working out on the fitness equipment. It was great. Are we going to see that kind of use? And then do we maybe want to move that away from the playground a little bit? You know, what gives us the best benefit for activating the entire park? As a grandparent, I love the playground next to the restroom. I love the fence around it where you don't worry that a child's going to wander out. I think there was a concern about the fence being fencing people out of the playground rather than keeping children safely in, which it'll be an open, the kind of thing we see at Parque de los Niños, where we just have that barrier to keep kids in. So those are my thoughts. I really like the walkway around. The accessible walkway is multi-purpose. It provides access for everybody, but it's also for kids, it's a recreational use too. So we get people out and moving. The 90-minute parking is different. It's loading only in 1 and 90-minute parking. Is there a reason for that, or is that to be addressed later?
Thank you, Commissioner Longstreet, for your comments and for that question. Those, again, as Ms. Zachary pointed out, these are concept plans specifically to ask to solicit comments, just like yours. And since we're talking about the 90-minute and loading, actually that was not really well received. People would rather not see something like that. And so in the next rendition, you won't see that again. But we're hoping to have something where people can pull over to us so they can stage an event and unload their equipment. And I think it's a brilliant idea to separate uses.
Oh, good. I got brilliant today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Could you put the playground more like in the middle between like the natural turf lawn and the oaks? That way you have the playground as more of like a focal point in the center, and then you could have large picnic on the side by the parking, and then put the fitness kind of towards Soledad, and then you've got multiple activities going on. You know, kind of like to Commissioner Longstreet's point, it's not so heavy on one side. I don't know, it might be a lot of extra work to do that, but it kind of be that happy median that kind of ties the whole park together. And you'd get some shade on your playground as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Beck. That's a great suggestion. it'll show up in our next version. We've had some comments about that, in responding again to Commissioner Longstreet's comment about maybe relocating, activating the play area, if the play area is moved, activating it with another event space, such as maybe locating the exercise equipment there. People would like to be able to see directly from one end of the park to the other. So there was a suggestion to move it so the line of sight is a little bit clearer. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, one of the things I would just add too is balancing the turf play space with the playground space. Certainly moving it further into the area that's currently turf, which we've done somewhat, would allow for there's a number of mature oak trees on this property. But when we were there that last Saturday, there was a family event occurring near the playground. So we could create a much larger sort of designated family children's play area that would still mean they need to walk to the restroom. And it is actually a very small park. So it's not that far. It's not the distance that's the issue. It's having a restroom that people will feel safe using.
A comment along that line for the Oaks aspect of it. I really liked the circle with the stumps. I can see hours of play fun on that, as I can see hours of kids going around in circles on the pathways. Maybe we can look at having some decent sized boulders or some natural, that kind of climbing stuff that kids love, that then activates the more passive area under the trees. It's a beautiful area. And I can see that then we could, draw the older kids in to that area.
Zachary, did you?
That's a great suggestion. I think, we are just sort of struggling with how to proceed. The most straightforward route, frankly, is to retain the playground in its current location, but increase its size, make it a lot more fun. But then some of the suggestions that you brought, how do we then extend that sort of children's play space more into the oak trees? I can say from my perspective in the position that I hold in the department, as much as we support the idea of people having a place to rest and enjoy being in a park, we have to balance the location of those resting areas with positive park activity. And so that's one of the things that we'll continue to look at carefully, is how to provide that space. And we've been fairly successful over time with Bonnet Park. Again, I think with our new renovation there, the way the tables are organized and how prominent and visible they are, and they aren't hidden underneath trees or in spaces that are hard to visually see into and through. Those are the same objectives that we would try to implement in this park as well.
Thank you. I was wondering if this would be a good time to invite members of the public. I believe there might be a couple.
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands. If anybody would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the GoToWebinar control panel. And no hands have been raised.
Right, that brings it back to us.
I would add, Chair Clark and Commissioners, when we sent out the flyer for this, for the open house, it also included attendance at the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting, and that not attendance, the opportunity to have comments, as well as at this meeting. So we did strive to put that outreach in place throughout the neighborhood.
Thank you for that. So so this is on our agenda for discussion. It's not for action. Most of us have said something about this project. Do you want us to specifically give you a preference of one of these concept plans over the other? Or we all helpful with what we already said?
Chair Clerk and Commissioners, yes, if each of you has specific comments related to either of the plans or additional suggestions, this would be a great time to provide those to us. We will continue to work with the design and advance what we believe meets as many desires as possible. We're never 100% there with every park project, but we do strive for that. And if we feel like there's another way we need to reach back out to the community, we'll try to address that as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess we can go one by one and say what we're feeling. I'm going to start off really briefly by saying this is a hard one for me because I trust the research and I trust the department, and what you've done at other parks and creating active participation has really made the park safer for everybody. But change is hard. People don't always want to see change. And I find it difficult as someone who doesn't live in the main neighborhood to say, you know, this is what's good for you. That's why I value this outreach you've done so much. And because it's the community telling us what's good for them. So I'm leaning towards, my preference would be to keep the playground in the area it's at after hearing concerns of neighbors, but also making it larger and extending it into the park to increase active participation throughout the park. I don't believe that I'm necessarily right. That's just how I feel about the project. And I think, like you said, Ms. Zachary, continuing the outreach and doing the greatest good to the greatest number of people. You guys have the numbers and you have the research. I trust in you to make ultimately the right decision. My preference is to leave the park and extend it. And with that, I'm going to invite everybody to speak one by one, and who would like to go next?
I would. My preference, I don't really know the park that well, would my preference would be to keep the playground where it is and spread out the activity so we don't have a space where we feel it's unmonitored.
I'm not quite sure I got all of that. Ms. Zachary, did you get all of it?
Yes, thank you, Jacob.
And who?
I'll go. I agree with Jacob. My main goal is to move the activities throughout the park to activate the entire space. Some of it more passively, which doesn't quite make sense, but you know, to have, let's say, the more natural activities, the maybe log and boulder in the center and the circle, and the fitness separated from it may allow more space for the fitness equipment to be spread out organically in an area if it's not right next to the playground. I like the idea of having a playground located next to a restroom. If you have lived with a park with a problem restroom, you might be terrified to have the playground next to the restroom. So I don't think there is an exact right or wrong answer. I think the key to this park renovation is just going to be to activate every area. And I would be curious before a plan was set in stone to hear the response from maybe the principal at Franklin, and I do believe the other school, the academy that's there, uses that daily. Maybe there may be some input from that staff about that would be useful in how this playground, a plan would work. I think it looks very good. I think whatever happens here, especially when we consider that we have the gardens in the back to activate people coming through a large portion, it's going to be a wonderful place for the neighborhood. I don't think we can address what happens on the street with the parking and the issues that I know when everybody comes to a community meeting, they want to address things that we don't have any control over. But I think once the park is activated, those other things will fall better into line.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Gill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo agreement in support of spreading out activities to activate as much of the space as possible. But in thinking about where do you put the playground, I really, the research really resonated with me. And I started thinking, if you look out 5 years and you've had a really, really successful park renovation and it's a really lively, active space. If you're looking out 5 years and you're really envisioning it, which of these layouts gets you there? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm guessing that the people who are expert at this probably do. And I would be inclined to say that if there is a clear answer from how parks work in the city and how parks work in other cities, I would pay attention to that.
Thank you. Commissioners Feck, Baker, Perry, did you want to provide comments before we move on?
And to reiterate, I definitely lean towards but I think it'd be cool to see the playground more like centrally located between the natural oak and the natural lawn and just have that a little more central. But I also I like the idea of having that more centered. But.
Thank you.
I agree with Bibi mentioned flow, and I think that's important. Just having, I mean, the park used for so many different reasons and so many different people. I think just having a space that everyone from the community can use, as long as it's safe and can be maintained, I think those are the key components.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry?
All right. I want to agree with the sentiments that a playground in proximity to a restroom is probably the smartest move. I wish I had a larger picture of this layout. I think the open space is important. I think it's more critical than putting activities into it and keeping your activities around the perimeter so you can fill that area spontaneously. Whether it's a funny little soccer game or a little bit of frisbee or somebody brings croquet, I like having the open space that you can see from the street to the back. Wonderful plan. It's going to serve that neighborhood very, very well.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. All right. I think we've all With that, we can move to the Dwight Murphy Field. Oh, but let's thank Ms. Johns first. Thank you again for that excellent presentation and chance to speak in the park. We appreciate your work and outreach.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, that brings us to the Dwight Murphy Field renovation presentation, which is for action.
Chair Clark, commissioners, I will be doing the presentation. However, we also have Rich Hanna, Justin Van Mullum, and Kelsey Hamilton available to answer questions. I'm very pleased that we're here today. This is the second of the two parks where we engaged in a master plan process beginning in 2018. And the commission was involved through that. We've been working on the preliminary design drawings through COVID and are at the point where we'll be seeking your findings before we go on to the planning commission to hopefully have the project approved. So next slide, please. So a little bit of history. Dwight Murphy Field's been a city park since 1925. It's was known as the Municipal Soccer Field, got renamed after Dwight Murphy in 1933. The improvements that you see in the park today, such as the restrooms, were constructed in 1969. So they've been around for a little while, a little over 50 years. We've made some improvements to the parking area, the fitness area that was observed earlier today, and its use was actually relocated from Spencer Adams Park to this park in 1991. So it's been there for quite a while. It is very popular and well used, and we'll talk a little bit more about the vision for the new fitness area for the park. The playground that's in the park was installed in 2007, so it's now 2021. It's in need of replacement. However, we've not pursued that given that we're working on this master plan and we have a wonderful proposal for an all-inclusive playground for the new park. This park has the only regulation-sized soccer field in the city of Santa Barbara. And Commissioner Longstreet will probably remember when we did the recreational field study years ago, just like we did the aquatics feasibility study years ago. Both of those studies indicated that we didn't have enough of either. And so that hasn't changed. However, we do have the opportunity to maximize this space just as we're proposing to maximize or take a park. Next slide, please. So just quickly to review, particularly Commissioner Feck, since you're newer to the commission, during the 2008 master plan development, we had over 850 people, community members participate. We held 2 community workshops. We actually held them at the zoo because the zoo is adjacent. We could be inside and we used the Discovery Pavilion. We also had on-site community meetings. We did online surveys and then a series of public hearings, both Architectural Board of Review for the design. The Parks and Recreation Commission has heard this project a number of times, once in a joint meeting with the Neighborhood Advisory Council, a second time when we asked the commission to sort of recommend council approve the final master plan once it was revised, and then subsequently throughout moving forward with this project. And then the City Council also provided the approval to move forward with the preliminary design in early 2019. Through these meetings, a lot of the key issues that we heard from the public are a huge support actually for artificial turf in this location, nighttime play, and the turf recommendations really go back to wanting to have the ability to use this field every single day of the year. We have to close this field just like we have to close or take a park 4 times a year for extended periods of time because the turf just gets overused, overloved, and we can't keep it up. Improvements to pedestrian access and circulation, traffic and parking being a key consideration, and then also maintaining the uses that are already there, including the fitness space and the youth baseball space. Key to this, and we'll talk more about that, is going from a standard city playground to the first all-inclusive playground for the city of Santa Barbara. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an idea of where we want to be. On the left shows our existing aerial of the park, and on the right, the proposed redesign. Very much same amenities that we have today, just relocated in some cases, enlarged in other other cases, and then also improvements to access and circulation. Next slide, please. So want to spend some time walking through the different aspects of the park to reorient the commission. We've done work, as I mentioned, through preliminary design, and that's where we go from this great master plan concept into a little bit more reality and figure out really how we would build this, and then also to go through the city's design review and development review process. So the number one on the slide shows creek restoration. So this is the area adjacent to Sycamore Creek that will be planting trees and native habitat in support of the project. Area number two, that is where the current restroom is located, just to give you a sense, and show you in a subsequent slide where the current restroom is located and where the new restroom will be located. So this one would be removed from this location. Number three shows reconfigured parking. So what we're able to do with this proposal, and we've worked with Public Works Transportation, is increase parking within the park itself, but also increase parking off-site. So in the increased parking itself, we actually have created additional parking between the park road and the playing field, and then also along the park road. And I bring up Park Road because that actually is a park road. It is not a city street. So we're taking advantage of trying to improve circulation by maintaining it as a park road and actually maintaining it so that if you're going, let's say, southwest toward Milpas, you actually have to turn around and come back, and you can circle through the parking lot. So there won't be through access as there is today in this location. The new enlarged fitness area, that's number 4. So it'll be about twice the size of what we currently have now. And then the multi-sport field. And then, as I mentioned, the one-way, and it shows at Port Lamar. So Port Lamar will remain a two-way street, but entering the park from Port Lamar would have to be done. If you can see that double arrow between the edge of the parking lot and the edge of the multi-sport field. Next slide, please. So some other things that we'd like to share is the bird's eye view of what we anticipate the park will look like when it's done. And again, this is looking down at the proposed fitness area, which also has an adjacent turf area for viewing and participation for the multi-sport field. It's adjacent to the parking lot. And then you'll notice a sidewalk, and throughout the slides that we show you, there is a sidewalk that will circle the entire park. So we'll have access through and around the park, which there is none today. I don't think there's one pathway that even could be construed as a sidewalk in Dwight Murphy Field today. And again, given the age of the facility and how it's been used, it's just, we haven't had that kind of reinvestment. Next slide, please. So the fitness area design, mentioned earlier in today's meeting that we had an open house last Thursday, but prior to that open house, recreation staff conducted an online survey, bilingual survey, to get some feedback on the type of fitness equipment that both our fitness professionals, but our other stakeholders that we know are engaged and have been engaged in the fitness amenities we've been installing in city parks in different locations. The survey went out to 635 email addresses. We received 117 responses, and those responses were tabulated and presented at the community open house, where we shared the responses and then solicited more input. Next slide, please. So in this slide, it gives you a sense of what was presented at the meeting last Thursday. And then also what came out of the public meeting results. And I don't have the final numbers of how many people attended last Thursday, but we definitely had a good contingent of the folks that currently use the equipment that's there, but also people that were in the park recreating for other reasons, stopped by and gave us their input. What we found is they want to prioritize strength equipment and also group fitness layout, which is where you have a piece of equipment where it can be used by multiple people at the same time. We also heard that they wanted more than one of the same thing. So if there was going to be parallel bars or monkey bars or pull-up bars, we needed more than just one. And they would need to address the different height of the individuals that were using those bars. And then combination apparatus, the fitness world, particularly the outdoor fitness and indoor fitness world, has really changed in the last 30 or 40 years. And the advantage of that is anything that we do put in can be used by multiple types of users, because those that are more intensively engaged in strength training on fitness equipment will also bring their own materials to the outdoor gym and add those, whether it's straps or whether it's any other type of equipment. So to that end, we heard very strong support for a surface that could support on the ground activities. So not, what we've been talking about is, well, it could be decomposed granite, it could be this, and we actually got a lot of recommendations on a different type of material that would work really well in an outdoor application. Next slide, please. And I would add, so all of that feedback, just like everything else we've done, will go into the final design of the park, and we'll actually be able to select the equipment and locate the equipment. And as we move forward with that, similar to what we did at Cabrillo Ballpark, when we actually went into designing where those pieces would go and picking those pieces, we'll use this community input for that, to achieve that. So over in the other area of the park, we have the playground, the new restroom and youth baseball field. Letter A shows Niños Drive, and it actually shows a change in the parking configuration, showing that the parking would be perpendicular to the park and to the sidewalk rather than parallel, which is what it is now. B gives it as actually an entry plus a family picnic gathering area. It's also where we'll have bike racks, the end of the park. C is the youth baseball area, but it's natural turf, so it also will support drop-in use, casual drop-in use. The restrooms, number D, one of the key things that we really had to make sure we achieved is moving the restrooms out of the floodway, which is one of the reasons why the restrooms are in a different location, but also ensuring that they're still centrally located and easily accessible by users throughout the park. And then E, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, is the inclusive all abilities playground. I will say that, and actually let's just go to the next slide. So here's another bird's eye view to give the commission an idea of the entry into the park. It shows where the bike stations are. It also shows the sidewalk that would go between the multi-purpose sport field and the youth baseball field, and circle around, and in the top corner of the slide where the restrooms are, and then to the left again the sidewalk walkway path area that leads into the playground. Next slide, please. Again, a bird's eye view of the whole park, so it gives a sense of how it would relate, where people can park, the circulation, the different activities, how things are located. Next slide, please. So the playground, the All Abilities Playground, really the vision for the playground came from the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. And they approached us back in 2016 with the idea of fostering the first All Abilities Playground for Santa Barbara. Their foundation is actually named after their daughter, who was born with spinal muscular atrophy. She lived for 7 years, and they spend a lot of their time trying to find ways to bring joy, and how she brought joy into other people's lives. And the times they spent in public parks, finding ways to have their child use a park amenity, even though it was clearly not designed for a child that was largely confined to a wheelchair or unable to breathe on her own. And so their vision is that this playground will be able to serve children of all abilities with the desire that all children deserve to be able to play. And there's definitely a very significant movement throughout the country and elsewhere to make playgrounds more accessible beyond just the ADA pathway to the unit, but really designed for people with all abilities. So the design of the playground is extremely creative. Our design team, RRM, has been working closely with us and with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation to create a very whimsical play space with a number of different zones that foster social, cognitive, and physical development. The ideas that are underway is having a music garden, a swing zone, a spinner zone, a sensory garden walk, and then the crowning feature is a multi-level magical tree, which will be a multi-level engineering feat, but we're working hard at trying to make that happen with the idea that regardless of one's physical ability or a child's ability, they will be able to enjoy every aspect of the playground. Next slide, please. So this is the visual of how this playground might play out. Very colorful, very open, very creative. And again, through the final design process, that's where we'll be sharpening our pencils and really determining what can work here. Next slide, please. And then very quickly, restroom buildings. We have to have a restroom. We're really focusing on making sure it's entirely accessible, unisex, also modular. One of the most expensive things to build in Santa Barbara is either a very large garbage enclosure at the Cabrillo Pavilion or a restroom. And this is a park that's a sports facility that needs to be a park that this element of the park has to have a lot of utility. And so we are planning to bring in restroom buildings that can very easily be modular and expanded and meet different needs and have different ways of going in and out depending on who's using it, because we also need to accommodate the fact that there will be users of the playground that will need a much larger restroom than even just a standard ADA restroom. So making sure that through this process we've provided that as well. Next slide, please. So for the neighborhood compatibility, there's a couple of things for the commission to consider and that we've considered through the design process and ensured that the proposed project should not have any impacts and that should be compatible with the neighborhood, particularly parking. Those of us that have tried to park there in a busy summer day know that it gets a lot of use from a variety of uses. So one of our key objectives is actually to increase parking and try to make it easier to use the park and the neighborhood around it. And then noise. One of the key sources of noise in this location is traffic. With the one way of the park road, that may reduce some of the traffic because there won't be a lot of the throughfare, so it'll also be safer. But it is next to the train and it is the railroad and it is next to the freeway. So trying to keep that in mind with trees and landscaping and improvements to the park that way. And then for lighting, I go back to noise. This park would not have amplified sound like most of our city parks. So there's no proposal to change amplification at the park. And then lighting for field use. We currently have lights for the field now. We would be upgrading those and then also adding lights to improve pedestrian visibility and access. The park would have regular park hours, so sunrise to 1/2 hour after sunset, unless by permit. So one of the objectives here, as the commission could imagine, is that having night games will be really feasible, both with the lighting and also the fact that the field will be able to withstand additional use than day use. But again, it would only be by permit only. Next slide, please. So we're currently in environmental review, the city planning division. We are set to go to the planning commission on August 19th. And once that we achieve approval, we'll need a coastal development permit for this project since it's in the coastal zone. We'll move forward with design development and construction drawings. We have funding in the budget, and I'll go over that in a minute to take those next steps. Depending on funding, construction, best case scenario would be fall to 2023. And again, that depends on how the funding comes together. Next slide, please. So to date for the commission, just as a reminder, we spent just over $130,000 in development of the master plan. Since then, we've been working on preliminary design and a host of technical studies that go with that. It's been jointly funded by both the city and the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. We have a memorandum of understanding, and they have funded 50% of the preliminary design and technical studies. The funding for this year, $400,000. Again, we have a commitment from the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation to support 50% of the design. So this is really it's unheard of in my career with the city. The fact that we have this really strong partnership and a joint vision for enhancing this park, and that it really can provide not just a local benefit, but that it serves as a regional park, but a regional benefit and draw a wide variety of park users and families. We will still need some more funds before we sort of are ready to build, but hopefully those will get allocated in fiscal year 23. So the commission will hear more about that when we go into budget development. We'd like to add that the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation has already been fundraising. I think they've raised over $1 million for the project, and they're hoping to raise, I think, up to $5 million for the project. They're actively fundraising for the whole project, not just the playground. So we're working with them on that. There's lots of information on their website related to that. And we're also working on seeking out grants. So there's a grant opportunity through state parks coming up this fall for a regional park grant program. Learn today, it's going to be highly competitive, but what else is new? We'll still be looking for the opportunity to find a way to bring other funding to bear, as well as putting it into the city's capital program for construction. And with that, can we go to the next slide? So today we're asking the commission to make findings pursuant to Municipal Code Section 28.37.025 and recommend that the Planning Commission approve the Dwight Murphy Field renovation project. Next slide, please. So these are the findings. It's also in your staff report. I would be happy to read them out. However, also first happy to answer any questions or comments from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Does anyone have questions or comments? It's hard to have questions when you make such an excellent presentation that covers everything, but.
No questions, just that I love it, and I love that playground. It looks beautiful. I love all the colors, and I think it's going to be awesome. So, and I love that it's all abilities. I think that's wonderful. So great. All for it.
Can we play on it at the ribbon cutting, even though we're not children? I want to get in that tree. Vice Chairman Gil.
Yeah, me too. This is fabulous. It's just totally fabulous. And the partnership with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation is really, I don't have enough superlatives for that one. It's just a really, it's a great relationship that's developing there. The only question I had was, so I look forward to enthusiastically supporting the recommendations. But the only question I had was around the fitness feedback for the fitness equipment. And really what I was curious is this isn't that far away from Cabrillo Ballpark. So what I was wondering is it actually the same user group at Cabrillo and Dwight Murphy? And if not, really what I'm playing with is the idea that should there actually be a distinct theme to the two different parks, so that you do Cabrillo Ballpark for one thing and Dwight Murphy for another thing. Just amuse.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, yes, there are different users. And, Cabrillo Ballpark, the intent there is to make that equipment accessible to a broad cross-section of the community. And one can go by there just about any day of the week and see older residents using the aerobic equipment, younger residents with various other ropes and things that they bring with them to do greater workouts, visitors, passing through. And then at Dwight Murphy Field, that has been there for, as I mentioned, since 1991, and it has a core group of folks that really do strength work and work in teams in their strength work, and they have it's really partly also quite social. So the use of that area has grown quite a bit more, and I would characterize, and if either Kelsey or Rich want to jump in, they're more than welcome to. They're more of the hardcore strength fitness folks. So so what we're proposing would meet that need, but still wouldn't preclude use by folks that might be there watching their kid play soccer. So that's that balance of the two. But there was less of an interest in the actual aerobic style equipment and much more in strength, flexibility, weight bearing, those types of things at Dwight Murphy Field for that type of use. So we actually think it's good to have something different.
Yeah, great, thanks. And I guess the only other comment, okay, so there's no such thing as an attractive restroom, but this one struck me as notably unattractive in the mock-ups, and I understand, I understand the rationale behind it being modular, but I have a slight concern with its prominence to the entrance, having something that aesthetically not wonderful.
So Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is conceptual only. These restrooms can be wrapped, can have murals, can have different facades. It's really the placeholder. And then also the view of the restroom is actually not going to be that significant. From Port Lamar, you'll only be able to see the roof. And then from the park, it'll be all the way across if you're on Ninos Drive. And so that's really just to give a sense of the location and the layout, and there's more work to be done on the design.
Thank you.
May I?
Commissioner Perry.
In a word, fabulous. The layout, the activities, the diversity, the catering to a wide range of the population. It's absolutely gorgeous. So hats off to RRM, hats off to your involvement, Jill. I think you've done a phenomenal job here. Look forward to it opening.
Commissioner Longstreet.
I'm really impressed by the gain in parking. I like that the number of disabled spots down by the playground, the accessible spots, I think is probably a better term. I also like reclaiming Park Road and making that just not given away totally to streets. The restrooms, moving them seems so much more logical to have them that close to the playground and the ball field, the youth baseball field. I don't think we can thank the foundation enough. I think what a legacy for their daughter. I mean, that was, you just have to admire people that activate that way and provide that kind of love for the rest of the community. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. Also, it was several years ago when we heard from that group, that core fitness group that used Dwight Murphy. And there was a young man who works with other young men who've had some issues, who've had troubles, and gets them into fitness. And he was inspirational also. And so it's nice to see that we're maintaining that. In our community, not everybody can afford a gym, and to have these outdoor facilities for people it's who we want in our park. It's it's the uses we want. So I'm glad to see everyone seems to be addressed, that the youth baseball's in there, that the field will be usable all year long and not just, we won't have to shut it down. And that we'll get rid of that hideous building that we currently have on site. So if we think the new restrooms don't look good in that box shape, boy, that old one is really ugly. So, will there be some bleachers at the soccer field? That's the one thing I'm just thinking of. Or is that something we can't really deal with at this current time?
Yeah, Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, we've definitely had a lot of discussion about that, and the feedback from recreation staff is that the bleachers aren't actually used that much.
Okay.
And they take up space in a way that makes it more difficult to really squeeze in what we'd like. And I think the ability to actually travel all the way around the field on a pathway and view the sport activities that are going on in the field, as well as, if you can see sort of adjacent to the parking area, providing a grassy turf area for folks that are there watching games and tournaments and any number of reasons, that there'll be a lot of opportunity to spectate and not be confined to a bleacher. There's, from my understanding, that bleachers are less popular than they used to be. And again, it really depends on the venue. So if it was a much larger venue, clearly it would be different, but in a park setting, less of a need. And then, to be honest, bleachers also bring a variety of uses that aren't terribly positive.
Right. And I agree with all of that. If it isn't going to work, I don't think they're necessary.
I actually thought you were being crafty with the bathrooms and having a substrate that couldn't be graffitied on, and I liked it. With the slats. I was like, oh, that's clever. Agreed. Kudos to the fitness equipment. I've been going to La Mesa Park every week, and there's always a group of people doing outdoor exercise, and it just brought home with COVID, not only, like Commissioner Longstreet said, people can't always afford to go to a gym. Some people don't want to anymore. I know I haven't rejoined mine because I'm afraid to go inside. So, yeah. And then I was wondering if there is a way we could incorporate extending community thanks to the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation after the realization of this project, whether it be putting like a big billboard up at the park for a week that people who use it can sign, like a card, or if we can digitally do something online, like have a QR code they can scan and like add to a thank you, just to express our gratitude. Anyway, something we have time to think about.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I didn't go into sort of the fundraising strategies and objectives of the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation, but they will have in the park itself opportunities to acknowledge donors, the donor wall. The playground will be named after Gwendolyn, so it is Gwendolyn's playground, but certainly promoting the partnership and the sincere generosity of private individuals to invest in a public open space, because it is a public open space. It will stay a public open space. It really follows along so much of the philanthropy that made Santa Barbara parks what they are today. And perhaps we'll support a resurgence in the reinvestment in our parks and open spaces, because we wouldn't have what we have today if it wasn't for a significant amount of generosity many, many years ago. Lastly, if I could just add for the commission, we do have the open house tomorrow, and that is welcoming everybody in on all the different aspects of the park so they can, see where we are and what our next steps are. And Victoria Strong will be there, part of our sort of group presentation talking about the vision for the playground. And then there are a number, as we hopefully continue, even if it's a bit bumpy for a while, to move out of COVID, there'll be other opportunities to support their fundraising efforts as they seek ways to generate funds for the park. And from the department standpoint and from the city standpoint, we are in lockstep with supporting their efforts to fundraise and doing whatever we can to ensure that we're useful, positive partners for everything that we're doing at this site.
Can you remind us what time the open house is?
It's at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And it'll be kind of where the new entry will be probably, because that's where we set up last week. It actually worked out really well. But don't quote me on that because I don't know exactly what's happening in the park. There was a lot of activity in the park while we were there, so that's always good too.
Right, I will be out of town, but I can't wait to hear about it. Is there, Ms. Navarez, is there anybody here to make any comments from the public?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay, great. With that, are there any further questions? Because if not,
I would like to make a motion
please.
that we make the following findings pursuant to Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 28.37.025, that the proposed park and recreation improvements are appropriate and necessary for the benefit of the community and visitors, that the proposed park and recreation facilities, including synthetic turf field, youth baseball field, all-inclusive playground, outdoor fitness area, and new lighting, restroom, parking, and associated landscaping will be compatible with the character of the neighborhood, that the total area of this site and the setbacks of all facilities from the property lines and street are sufficient in view of the physical character of the land and proposed development and neighborhood to avoid significant negative effects on surrounding properties, that the intensity of park use is appropriate and compatible with the character of the neighborhood, that the proposed park and recreation facilities are compatible with the scenic character of the city, and that the proposed structures or buildings are compatible with the neighborhood in terms of size, bulk, and scale or location. And that we recommend the Planning Commission approve the Dwight Murphy renovation project.
Great. I'll second.
I'll third.
Do a fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh? Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. That brings us to our final agenda item, the annual election of chair and vice chair. We're going to elect a chair and vice chair to serve from August 1st of 2021 to July 30th, 2022. I would like to nominate Kathy McGill to be the chair.
I would second that.
Is there any discussion?
Or other nominations, I guess we have to take.
Well, would that be discussion? Are there any further nominations? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
We need a vice chair, right?
We do need a vice chair.
How we do.
Mr. Baker, do you have any interest in being the vice chair?
Not particularly.
Your time is not.
I know that I'm not always as involved, and I think that somebody who either would like to be, I think should be, like Roger, I know you wanted to be vice chair before, but I don't really have an interest.
So as that person,
We have some new people that, it's a good way to experience and move up through the system, I guess, engage in a different way. So, Ms. Beck, are you?
I don't know. I feel like I'm too new. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to. You guys word it all so well. I don't know that I'm quite there yet.
I've experienced the deep end sometimes is the best way.
Okay. I'm not seeing everybody jumping up for this. How about Ms. Clark? Do you want to be vice chair? Nobody seems to be jumping to this.
Would be happy to vice chair if some of our newer commissioners would start considering it for this next year. And I would love that.
Well, I'll nominate Chair Clark to be Vice Chair Clark next year, which, I mean, given how many of the subcommittees you are actively involved in, it's just, you very much are heart and soul of this commission, so it kind of makes sense for me.
All right, I would second that nomination.
Do we have any discussion?
What
All
is it? What kind of? Is it just like you serve doing that a year, and then what kind of like what's the role? Is it just being like a second, like an alternate? Just if I'll consider it, in the future, but kind of just want to understand a little bit more about what's all involved.
Yeah, it's being an alternate to the chair. So you would be running the meetings in the event that the chair couldn't make it, and just being as active and well-informed as you can be.
And
So
sometimes it means supporting something that's going before city council, like Kathy has recently spoken at Historic Landmarks about Ortega Park. It's being available for that kind of support of projects where we're trying to move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's probably the biggest distinction over and above. I mean, I think I've subbed in for Nicole twice, maybe three. I mean, maybe two or three. I think it's twice.
I work. Yeah, for me, it's not good because I work during the council meeting. So it's been wonderful to have such an active vice chair. She's never hesitated to just represent.
And that's been his role, I think.
And I did it for many years, both chair and had served as a vice chair. But I see my time as I'm on that downhill slope. I've been doing this like 20 plus years. And, I do it because I love it. And I know that you all are doing it because you love it. And I encourage you to, get involved in a stronger way. It's what makes it interesting is that. And, I just want to see the new leadership come up. I think we have really capable people and I encourage that.
Thank you.
Great. We'll go first and a second. We've had discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so moved.
One more thing, Chair. I would also acknowledge that during the time of these Zoom meetings, it's been really hard to get that feel for how a meeting runs.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We're not seeing each other, and that's a tough one. So hopefully we'll get back to in face.
Yeah, Commissioner Feck, have you been to council chambers for a meeting? I can't remember. No. Okay.
Even when I interviewed, it was all when COVID happened, so I haven't been on site at all. So yeah, it's all very new to me. So I appreciate the information and guidance. It's been cool, but I'm learning a lot. Yeah.
And also, I was thinking, and Ms. Zachary will relate to this. We just did a whole big project where we made findings. And in the past, we would have had a site visit right before, where we would have been on together and looking at where everything was going to go. And I think it has truly handicapped, some of that. Well, I know it's handicapped, but it's handicapped the development of commissioners because we can't be together and look at Dwight Murphy or walking through East Side Park with that plan in your hand is so different than sitting here looking at a screen or walking it by yourself. So hopefully the future will bring us new times together.
I guess I would like to make, we'd be remiss to not acknowledge Chair Clark, who I think you've done it 3 years now. Is it 3 years you've been chair?
2, I think.
I thought it was 3. Anyways, neither here nor there. Anyways, you've done a stellar job. I mean, you're great with the community members that come before us. You're great as a commissioner. You're engaged. You just seem to have the right touch, and you will be extremely big and tough shoes to follow.
I don't think you're going to have any problems, but I'll be right here. Yeah, you're going to be fabulous. I'm not dying. Well, actually, you know, I am going wilderness backpacking in 2 days, so maybe you'll never see me again, but no, I'll still be here. I have bear spray. Okay. Well, also, you know, we never thanked Daisy Hernandez for running the show. I mean, we're seeing her screen this whole time. I just wanted to say thank you, Ms. Hernandez. At least it says I'm viewing her screen.
My pleasure.
There you are. Okay, thanks for that. All right. Happy July. I hope to hear how great the open house is at Dwight Murphy tomorrow. And I'll see you in August.
Yeah,
I'll
when
see
you
you in September.
Yeah, yeah. When you come back, I'll tell you my story of being stalked by a bear in Alaska.
I hope I won't be telling you one.